Hello, and welcome to the Dean's Fireside Chat. I'm Seish Murthy, Dean of Computer Science and Software Engineering at Western Governors University. This month, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Andrea Simon, a corporate anthropologist, to the Dean's Fireside Chat. We will focus on unlocking success, empowering women in the IT industry. Let me begin by introducing our guest, Dr. Andrea Simon. Dr. Andrea Simon is an accomplished corporate anthropologist, published author, and a speaker with over 20 years of experience helping organizations solve complex business problems. She is the founder and CEO of Simon Associates Management Consulting, SAMC, a management consulting firm that uses the principles of anthropology to help organizations understand their culture, adapt to change, and innovate for the future. Throughout her career, Andy has worked with a diverse range of clients across various industries, including healthcare, finance, education, and nonprofit organizations. She has helped these organizations tackle a range of challenges from improving employee engagement and retention to developing new products and services. In addition to her work at the SAMC, Andrea is a sought-after speaker and has delivered keynotes and workshops for organizations such as the American Bankers Association, the National Speakers Association, and the TEDx Conference. She's a published author with several books to her name, and I can say that I've read her books and they're really good. These include On the Brink, A Fresh Lens to Take Your Business to New Heights, and Rethink, Smashing the Myths of Women in Business. Andrea holds a PhD in anthropology from the New School for Social Research and a BA in anthropology and English from Barnard College. She is a member of the American Anthropological Association, the National Speakers Association, and the Authors Guild. Andy is passionate about helping organizations unlock their potential and thrive in today's fast-paced business environment. She brings a unique perspective to every engagement she undertakes. Also joining me is Jared Plum, who is the Associate Dean of Software Engineering. So before we begin, just a second, Andrea, a few comments on the format. I'll ask Dr. Simon a few questions for about 35 to 45 minutes. And if you have any questions as we are talking, please put them in the Q&A session on the bottom right of your screen, and WebEx session, I mean. We will get to your questions after the discussions with Dr. Simon. So let's get started. Welcome, Andrea. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful, Sesh. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm watching your participant numbers grow, and it's really a great audience. I wish I could see you and meet you, but this is just a lovely way to engage with you. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time to talk to our students. Let me begin with the first question I have for you. So you're a successful academic, a businesswoman, and an entrepreneur. Tell us more about your journey and what our students can learn from it.
Thank you. That's a lovely question. I discovered anthropology as an undergraduate, and I had a professor, and I just sort of found myself with a purpose. It sort of spoke to me in ways that were meaningful. And so I went to Columbia to finish my undergraduate, and then I went on to the City University to get my graduate degree, and then I got a professorship at Ramapo College, where I was really happy doing research on American studies, on immigration and return migration to Greece. Actually took my two daughters when they were 4 and 5 to spend several months studying Greek women. It was an exploration. And then by chance, my husband was a banker, and he at a conference, pardon me, at a cocktail party, introduced me to a bunch of city bankers. And they said, why don't you come and help us? You study change and how people adapt, and we're going through deregulation. And by chance, I ended up going into Citibank as a consultant, and I spent almost 20 years, about half of those in banking as an executive at 2 banks, and the rest of those as an executive at 2 hospitals. The common theme, though, was as an anthropologist, I could step back and look at what was happening and often help the people who are going through the changes see things through a fresh lens. And then after 9/11, I launched my business as Simon Associates as a corporate anthropologist who helps companies change and the people inside them. Because by and large, humans hate change. Their minds are very, very comfortable with what they know and what's familiar. And
Yeah.
as we were talking beforehand, your brain has a wonderful amygdala that will hijack anything that's unfamiliar and comfortable. It will flee it and it will fear it. We were absolutely successful as an animal that evolved because we didn't change, and then we changed a great deal. So our expertise is in helping people, and I say these words intentionally because you see, feel, and think before your brain gets engaged and you do something, but you have to see it so you know what it means, and you have to feel it because that's where you decide. That heart's connected to the head, and then the data comes in to really logistically tell you why it makes sense. But it's really a very interesting approach to help people step out and look at what's happening in a fresh and exciting fashion. And so today's talk is a very timely one because I was, as you can hear, in corporate, and I was often the only woman at the table. And in many of the cases, healthcare not so much, because healthcare was, much more balanced with women in leadership roles. They're nurses, and in several of the hospitals, they played very important roles. But in the banking industry, I was often the only woman at a board meeting, at a management meeting, or trying to manage a large organization. And I learned early about the difficulties of understanding the dynamics of a culture that is a male-dominated one. And in the IT world, for women and men, the challenges are changing. They're changing quickly. And the culture, Emily Chang calls it the bro culture, that came out of Silicon Valley, which is a male-dominated one, where the women sort of try to squeeze in with difficulty. But I don't care whether it's gaming or it's coding or whatever industry you're in, you're among aliens or foreigners or different. And now we got to figure out how can I survive and thrive in a culture that isn't necessarily welcoming or familiar to me. So that's how my career has led me to tonight to begin to share some of our insights, both as an anthropologist and as a woman, for those who are listening about how you can better see, feel, and think about what you're getting into. I hope that sort of sets the stage for us.
Perfect. Thank you. So then you talked about this to an extent. So let me um, the expand on what you said. So as a corporate anthropologist, you're an expert on culture, right? How has the culture of the IT industry developed? And how does, and so I'm going to come back to our students, right? How does it affect WGU students who are in IT? And what can they do now to prepare for this world? So it's a packed question. I have multiple things. You can go into any particular area that you want.
Well, let me start with some of the data points for the culture that the men and women who are listening are facing. Because I thought I was find that people want to know, well, what's the status? What is going on? And so as of 2022, women made up 28% of the tech industry workforce. And I promise you I'll talk about culture in a moment. They made up 34% of those of the large tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft. But women do make up more than 50% of the workforce, more than 60% of the college students and the graduates, and those who are graduating with IT or STEM expertise are accelerating and amplifying. But on the other side of that, retention is very difficult, and women are leaving tech jobs faster and faster than the men do. And they do it for all kinds of reasons: microaggressions, discrimination, bias, lack of work-life balance, which leads to this question of what kind of culture are these women entering? What is culture anyhow? And I'll break it into three parts. When you go into an organization, humans have created this thing called a culture, which gives them rules for the way we will behave here. And if you ever go into a place, people will say to you, well, that's not the way we do it here. When you're onboarded into a culture, they will tell you the way we do things here. And you may pause for a second and say, well, what does that actually mean? But you'll watch, and you'll watch others because we're mimics, and you'll begin to bond by those mirror neurons in your brains beginning to pick up the signals that others are doing to get things done. Now, that could be anything from working in silos to working all night long, to working in group meetings, to sharing and teaming. I mean, I work with enough cultures who are so collaborative, nothing gets done, and so competitive that nobody talks to each other. But you pick up very quickly what the demeanor is. And so we often talk about the fact that humans have a story in their mind, and we live that story, and then they have behaviors that they do every day, and then they have the norms and values that reinforce it. And it's all built into the story that happens. So the culture, when you're looking at an organization, is going to define for you how we will get things done here and whether or not you're going to belong. And the other part that's very critical is people, men and women, want to belong. It's a very safe place to be. And if you don't feel like you belong, whether it's what you wear or how you act, you feel alien to it. And outsiders don't have a good time inside. So thinking it from the perspective of a woman getting into an IT field that was started and really grew by men for men, although many parts of it were women dominated, but they really lived a life where the women came in and were outsiders. And sometimes they were and really accepted, and other times they were happily kept on the outside. I met one gentleman who had worked, he said to me, I worked 3 months to get somebody to join my company, a woman, and she only lasted 3 months. What was wrong with her? And I said, maybe it wasn't her. What was the mismatch? You were trying to build a diverse workforce, but you really didn't have one to move into. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Sesh, because the audience is really interested in this intersection, I suspect, with what I am and what I do and where I go to work every day and how do I make it work and how that culture plays such an important part. Please.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was so there's a lot there, and I've taken some notes, and I'm going to get to them in order and what you suggested. So the what can before I go into um, diving into the questions, I have one more question for you that I want to set the stage. What can WGU do, and in particular, the College of IT and the Computer Science and Software Engineering Department? What can we do to prepare women at our programs in WGU to succeed in their careers in IT? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a wonderful question because often it isn't addressed in a university. I mean, I was very involved in Washington University, and we were just up there, and nobody's really addressing the soft skills or the survival skills or the skills that you're going to need to be in an environment. So I always have a couple of ideas that I love to share, one of which is role playing. I mean, when you come out of the university and you go into an environment, you're going to play a new role. But role playing would be a wonderful way to begin to train. So people have a script to use there with a multi-gender, multi-ethnic environment, and they can begin to practice how I'm going to behave in a culture that I'm getting into. So I really love environments that are active learning environments because we learn best when it's experiential. So the first thing I would urge them to do is create an environment where we can play roles and we can practice what's going to happen when it comes. And that's with guys and gals
Mhm.
because both of them are going to have to learn to talk together, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. And the second thing that they might begin to do is help them understand what it is like to work in a male-dominated industry. You may have a course or you may not, but you're going to have to begin to help them get internships, begin to taste what it's like to be there, and have a mentor or somebody who can help them talk about the issues and the difficulties in a way that is comforting on one side and coaching and developmental on the other. When else will they have somebody who can be safe and can watch what's happening and can
Yeah.
give them some suggestions? And the third part is that it's a good time for you to work with corporations who are hiring your folks. And often that is a really important role you play to begin to help them assess the environment, the culture that they're bringing your students into, begin to see who thrives and who doesn't, so how you can better match them up. And I often think that part of the university's role is a placement function that's more than just the educate, but it's also the placement. And that
Mhm.
builds collaborations with you in the industries where you're supporting with trained employees. So my three thoughts is, can you develop role playing and send you, and then, how do we get them to begin to understand what's going to happen? And then how do we get the corporations to begin to see this as a collaborative initiative? That isn't just you didn't train them well enough and they don't work well enough here, as opposed to, boy, we created together a better workforce. And I do think that the times are changing. It might be really cool to see what could come out.
That's a really uh, powerful answer. The There's a lot for us to unpack there, and I will get to that in order. So let me see, where do I want to focus on next? Um, so um, let me ask you, you touched upon this when people were role playing and they were the etc. But uh, you had, when we had talked earlier, you had suggested that there's a good idea to pick up, uh, certain skills and areas of expertise. Which are these areas of skills and areas of expertise that women can focus on when they're at WGU and in the workforce to keep their competitiveness up? You mentioned that women are dropping out at larger rates, right? They're graduating at the correct number. So what is it what skills, what expertise should they be picking up when they're at WGU that will help them to succeed in their career, and how do they succeed in their career?
So I have I guess about a half a dozen that are good for your graduates, regardless of what industries they are going into, but
Yeah,
particularly essential for the ones going into IT, STEM, engineering, and so forth. The first one is, how do you grow a network? People say your network is your net worth.
right.
When do you learn to begin how you do that? So, how do you train yourself, even if your university isn't doing it, to go to conferences and begin to exchange business cards? I had a conversation with a woman not too long ago who goes to networking, and if they're all men in the room, she turns around and walks out. And I said to her, why? She said, I feel so uncomfortable. I don't quite know what to talk to them about. I said, you need to prepare a script as if you're going into an improv stage, because they're all there. They know what they're doing. Why are you uncomfortable? Because you have no preparation. So I share that as it was an interesting, appropriate story. Because if you're not prepared, you're going to try and ad hoc it. What will be the value of it? So prepare yourself. What do you want to get out of it?
Okay, I got that.
Now, my second one is, I don't think you ever stop being a learner. And
Okay.
so your technical skills, you may have developed some, but it would not hurt you to start in a new place and begin to assess the technical skills that were required for you to have a career there, not just a job. Now, you may just want a job. And if you do, that's fine. I know people who are perfectly happy having a job. But my hunch is that you are looking to achieve some results for yourself, a career perhaps. So the second thing is, what are the technical skills and how do you begin to realize that after graduation, nobody's going to guide you. You're now in charge. And
Hmm.
there's no faculty and there's no classes. And so how do you put a strategy and a plan together for what are the right foundational ones and how will you grow? And then how do you begin to talk to your employer about your own career aspirations and how to develop them? And sometimes they're right there waiting for you to come up with it. And my third point is that you need men and women as sponsors and mentors, and those are different. A mentor, and you might as well look at it during your university career. My mentor is somebody who is a safe coach, somebody who works with me, helps me grow, is not my critic, except if I need some criticism, but mentors me because we see in each other a value. One woman told me that she got mentors by not asking them to be mentors, but by just using them as mentors. And they didn't know they were mentoring her. And she said they were all men, and they all did a great job mentoring me. Sponsors, on the other hand, take you under their wing and want you to grow in the organization. And you need to understand how to find out who they are and the differences they have with those who are mentoring you. So there are some, pieces there that are important. Um, Two more. One is develop your soft skills. I gave several lectures to Michigan College presidents, and I was always fascinated because the university presidents would hear from Ford and GM, and it was Michigan, and they would come in and say, "You can teach them all those skills. That's great, but we need you to make sure that they have communication, that they are that they have communication skills, they have cooperation skills, collaboration skills, and can collaborate and really can solve complex problems well." And this is really important. Forgive me. I thought I turned my cell phone off. I apologize. But the soft skills that are coming are going to make it very useful for you to understand how to solve a problem, how to communicate your solution, how to build a team, how to begin to understand how I get things done by doing them with people and through people. How do I manage people? Where are you going to learn that? And in the university, find clubs, find associations, find outside internships, but intentionally build your soft skills. And if I hear soft skills anymore, I said they're skills, whether they're technical or they're human. You're going to need them. And last, you might as well begin to think about gender bias. I mean, gender bias is not to be ignored. You might as well understand that there are going to things that are going to happen as you get into a male-dominated industry, where you're going to be unhappy. And you're not going to understand how to deal with it. What kinds of things might happen? One woman told me she walked into meetings and there was never a chair for her.
Ouch.
Ouch. Yep. And so she could sit on the outside, but she thought she was part of the team. Another woman was always asked to be the note taker. She didn't want to be the executive secretary. She was an equal, if not at times a superior. But because of the roles that were being played, she was put into a role that was inappropriate. One woman who was president of an organization went into meetings and they thought she was the cat woman, the coat woman, forgive me. And they gave her the coats to hang up. She had to go into Lloyd's of London and walked around to the front of the room and said, "No, I'm here to bring you a big client." These are not little. There's a wonderful book out, and the title is "You Should Smile More," and it's written by a band of sisters that came out of Pepsi. And they got together and wrote a great book about all these things that as women they've experienced, even at different levels. And the "You Should Smile More" it was on a performance review. And it was irritating, insulting, but also off-putting. She didn't know what to say. Do you say that to a guy, that they should smile more? What is it about my behavior that requires more smiling than theirs? And these are not, you might as well begin to understand them. And for the men who are listening, you might as well begin to watch what you're doing. One thing I would urge you not to do is call her a gal. I'm working with one gentleman I'm coaching, and he keeps losing staff because he calls the women girls. And he doesn't understand that that's inappropriate. So this is, remember, the words we use create the worlds we live in. And so all of this is very important as you're getting prepared for a career in a male-dominated industry. And it isn't just IT. Remember, I have friends in banking, and still banking is a very male-dominated industry, and they can't find women to move up into senior places because there's no pipeline, and they fall off early and they disappear. You don't really want to do that. You're coming out with a great degree, wonderful training. Get ready for a very exciting journey.
Wow, that was a really packed answer. I'm glad we recorded it. I will go back and take a look at it. Let me see what you said. You said you know, to build out your network and your social skills, and you have to develop your technical skills. You have to, you know, build up your, yeah, um, to gain confidence. You talked about uh, uh, the managing the relationships with colleagues. What else? Let me see what I want to focus on next. With so you talked about mentoring and sponsorship, right? Do you want to expand on that? how can mentoring and networking opportunities contribute to the success of women in IT? And how do you find how do you find these mentoring and networking opportunities? How do you do that?
And you know, if you think forward, you can think during the university years that you build a network of support of the students who you may study together with, or ways in which you begin to look at a teaching assistant or a professor. Just use that as a microcosm. And as you reflect on it, think about how you built that network of supporters and who are the folks you were honest with, who are the folks were that you could count on. And as you team studied or you worked with somebody who was a teaching assistant or a faculty member, think of them holding different roles for you. Some are peers, and peer-to-peer mentoring is very valuable. Don't underestimate it, right? And then the teaching assistant, if you think of them as a mentor, they really aren't a full professor yet, but they are moving their way into an academic role, perhaps, but they're there to teach. And by and large, you're there to learn. And so now the question is, how do you tap into their wisdom and their experience? And then the full faculty person, the professor, assistant professor, associate professor doing research and really the professorial stuff, think of them as a sponsor. Because when you get into business, that sponsor is there to help you move up the organization. And they will say things to you like, you don't have any financial experience. When this job opens up, perhaps it would be good for you to get that experience. They're not setting you up to fail. They are encouraging you to take steps that may be unfamiliar or uncomfortable so you grow your skill set. They may say to you, you know, I think if you worked at another location for a period of 3 to 5 years, that would be good for them and for you. So they're beginning to move you on a career path. A mentor you might go to and ask them if they'll mentor you so you have a safe place where you can talk about personal challenges, work-life balance, how you're dealing with others in your team, challenges you have in silos, how things aren't getting on. One theme that's recurring everywhere is accountability. People take responsibility but aren't accountable. How do you get it done? So it becomes an interesting relationship. But you asked an important question. How do you do this? And I do think you might as well get your business cards out and start to think about this is a way of connecting and then nourishing. Because the more you nourish those relationships, the more they will count on you for what they need. And peer to peer is particularly important, but all of them will give you a community that will help you rise and find new places, even outside. If you're looking for jobs outside, you never eat alone. The first thing you do is call your network and begin to work it. So you're going to find your network is your net worth, and how you build it will be a skill set you never want to lose or diminish. So I get excited when working with women on that. It's very important.
Yeah, so yes, I like that phrase. Your network is your net worth. That's
It's your
great.
value. It's true. And who
Yeah,
you know is very important, not just what you know.
yeah, and uh, I can clearly see how that's valuable. This is good advice for both men and women. It really doesn't matter who
I
you
bet
are.
you have experienced the same things.
Yes, and when I was at IBM, the Uh, I got mentored by multiple people, and probably I got lucky finding them, and they helped me to get where I wanted to go. And I mentored a large number of people, and hopefully I helped them to get where they wanted to go. So yeah, this is a really good point that you brought up. Let me see what else I want to talk to you about. Um, you talked about dealing with gender bias when you get into the organization and how to deal with this. This one particular thing that you mentioned, and maybe you addressed it already, but what's your advice on dealing with microaggressions, right? Because they're all over, and so you have to calibrate your response, and that's a little difficult. And how do you deal with it?
So I'll give you my how-tos. First part is educate yourself almost in advance of the kinds of microaggressions that happen in even in all women corporations. I mean, people talk about women among women being catty or, and so you need to think about humans, and particularly in a male dominated industry, but all over, about, what is it, the behaviors, the language, and how does it affect you? So you need a little a precept on educating yourself. And then the second thing is choose your battles very carefully. If everything is a battle, I must tell you, you might be in the wrong place.
Okay.
It's not a bad idea when everything is a battle and nothing feels comfortable. If you don't belong, you don't belong. And you can work hard at being talented and technically skilled, but not endorsed or accepted. You're going to have a hard career track there. So that's my second. My third, I feel it sounds like Churchill, stay calm and composed. Because if you get excited, you add fuel to the fire. So if you're faced, it's essential to remain composed. Almost think ahead of time. How are you going to say, I see someone sitting in my seat at the table. I think that, Joe, you should sit over there and I'd be more comfortable here. But you need to say it in a way that he can giggle a little bit and you can pull the chair up and the two of you can bond a little bit over nobody paying attention. If you don't get heard at a meeting, talk to 2 or 3 people in advance so that when you do go in the meeting, they're already anticipating that they're going to support your thoughts and encourage others to do the same. You're changing the culture. And unless men can hear your words, you're not very valuable as a participant. But sometimes they don't know that they should be listening to you with an open mind. And having 2 or 3 allies to the women in the room helps because it changes the tone there. Then you may want to address something directly. You may really have a conversation with somebody who keeps asking you to get the coffee. And don't necessarily do it in a public fashion. But you might have an offline conversation which says, I'm not the coffee girl. I'm not the executive secretary. I am an equal to, a partner with, a director of, technically sophisticated with, and I'm not going to do the coffee. So kindly don't ask me to do so. But I think so-and-so is the executive assistant, and I will make sure that we have somebody there to handle it, manage it. You can get angry about it, but unless you manage it, it will persist, and nobody will even notice your irritation about it.
Mm.
Sometimes you're going to have to find some supporters. Now, that may or may not be your human resource area. Sometimes I find they are very supportive, and at times I find they don't know what you mean. So you're going to have to find a way to find some folks with some influence to influence others. This is influencers. If you find that there's a pattern, a particular person who is always undermining you, document it. You're going to have to put something together besides he said, she said. And if you're documenting it, then you can begin to address it more systematically with more data to affirm your position, and it wasn't simply you misunderstood or you misheard. For you going into a company, though, you may find yourself having to raise awareness of what's going on here. That gentleman who tried to hire a woman, and if she didn't last very long, I said, what is going on in your whole organization that has to be changed, or you'll never diversify and you'll never get the absolute talent that you're looking to capture. I said, it's not her problem, it's ours. And so you need to address that and build allies. There's nothing better than having a team of fans who all support each other. And all of a sudden you'll find that the tension diminishes and you will smile more. So, that's my how-to. And I sort of thought about it in advance of our talk because that's always asked me, what do I do? And I say, stay calm and move from there. I hope that's helpful.
That's amazing. First of all, I mean that you gave such a clear answer. I mean, again, this is recorded so people can go back and take a look at it. And uh, the it's a roadmap from how to get from here to there. Thank you. And I, I encourage people to go back and listen to your answer. Um, What else would you like to talk about? I mean, there are so many things. I could ask you questions about um, the role that male allies play in supporting women in tech. You want to talk about that?
I'd love
The
to. Because for both the women and for the men, you're going to have he supporting she. There's in my second book, Rethink: Smashing the Myths of Women in Business.
Mhm.
Almost every one of the 10 women who I interviewed 50 of them, and 10 I put into the book. But every one of them talked about having a man ally because there weren't any women. So it wasn't as if my geologist could actually find other women to be their mentors or sponsors. She had to find men. And she said they were very open and generous and supportive, more so than she had anticipated, but she never even thought about it. They just were good supporters and allies of it. One of the other stories of a woman in a law firm found the opposite, and she had a hard time, even though she became a partner and had a very serious senior position. She found that all the competition was always undermining. So, I mean, it's really important to find men who are supportive, and you in turn need to be supportive of them. This is a balancing act. It's not you're fragile and they're strong. It's together you're both intellectually and technically trying to build something in a way that's going to help. I also think that things like AI, blockchain, and other technologies are going to be causing everybody to rethink lots of things. And both men and women are going to have to work harder to understand how these new technologies are going to be assets and help each other grow. I had a coding company CEO tell me that the code that's coming out of the AI is as good as, if not better than what his folks can do. And now the question is, what shall he do? It's an interesting time.
Yeah, it is an interesting time, and we have touched upon that. I don't think he was saying the correct thing. It's not as good. I think that if the going off topic, but there's an opportunity for people to collaborate with AI to get things done. But we'll get to that on a later discussion. The uh, you there's one issue that uh, um, you had when we were talking earlier that you said was important, which is work-life balance, right? And you had said that that's important. And so, what what can our students, when they go out to work in the industry, what are effective strategies to uh, to get to work-life balance? Some part of the responsibility is the employer, and some part is the employee, right? So, what can be done to achieve a proper work-life balance? Do you have any views on that?
It's interesting. Earlier today,
Mhm.
I did a coaching session for a woman at a university who is struggling with being a mom. And she's got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old and a big job. And she said, I'm always thinking about the other when I'm at the other. It's very interesting because her mind, when she's with her kids, is thinking about the
Well,
work. And when she's at work, she's thinking about the kids.
mm,
And we were talking about how can she balance these worlds so that she actually enjoys both of them. Because she said, I'm not happy in either spot. And I share that with the listeners because it is not easy to find remember, you live the story in your mind. And so for her, it was discomforting to be really successful at work, knowing her kids were at home or somebody was taking care of them and she wasn't. And when she was home, she was never quite sure how to be a mom that wasn't thinking about what had happened. And I use that as an illustration because the balancing act is in your mind. And what we
oh,
were talking about is that when you're home with your kids, they are there only for a short time in your life. Be there, but the only one who's going to control that is you. So sit on the floor and play games with them. Take a puzzle out and sit at the table. Find things that are going to take your mind off work and make them around your children. And make it intentional. Be specific about it. And then on the other side, when you're at work, if you're comfortable that they're cared for, then just focus and enjoy the work. If not, you're not enjoying either of them. And I always remember my daughters were 14 months apart, and I had a professional career, and I was back in work in 3 weeks. And I remember the feelings that this woman had, and you may also. And then finally, I came to terms with the fact that when I was a mother, I'd be a mother, and when I was at work, I'd be at work. Of course, I was finishing my dissertation. It wasn't all that easy, but we got it all done without feeling guilty about either. And we always were. My one daughter once said to me, "Mom, this is your passion and your purpose," and I said, "Yes." And she said, "And I have a job," and I laughed. I said, "So I hope you find your passion, your purpose." And she said to me, "I'm not sure I want it. I'm perfectly happy with my family and what I do with the job." So you got to think through, what does this all mean for you? But it isn't easy. Somebody once said to me, "It's not a blend. It's not work-life balance. It's a blend." I always think that work is life and life is work. So it's a way we think about it, and you're going to have to change the way you think about it to find your own balance. I hope that answers your question and your listeners.
That's a great answer. I could go on for quite a while. I have I have 4 pages of notes, and I could continue for probably 2 more days. But it's 8:41, so why don't we see if there are any questions from the audience? Jared or Wanda, are there any questions that you want to highlight that we can bring to Dr. Simon's attention?
Could you repeat the names of your books? By the way, that's a good comment while I read some of these others.
Of course. My first book is called On the Brink, A Fresh Lens to Take Your Business to New Heights. And it's the stories of 6 of our clients where the use of anthropology could help them rethink their business, and they were all got stuck or stalled. And it was an interesting thematic, because whether it was a hospital or a pharmaceutical company, a small business or a large one, they got stuck. And so the research that we did with them was to help them see things through a fresh lens, which is where the anthropology came in. And the second book came out of work that we did at Washington University. We had a Simon Initiative for Entrepreneurship, and it was a 3-year program to help particularly women entrepreneurs take their observations and turn them into innovations. And the book, I realized that the women had a hard time. There were no role models. And so I wrote the book searching out people who could be good role models for them. And each one of the women basically said, "Of course I can." It didn't matter that women aren't attorneys or women aren't geologists or women aren't in aerospace. These women all said, "Of course I can." And they pushed through the barriers and really became successes, and exciting successes. I even have my own story in there, because who's a corporate anthropologist? And when I launched my business, there weren't many. And so part of it is to help you see things that are opportunities and push through. And my new book comes out in September. It's called Women Mean Business. And we've interviewed 102 women. We have the president of Siemens and the president of UPS and the president of Omega Travel. And I've got 100 amazing women, Chrissy Hefner, Lily Ledbetter, who all gave us 5 wisdoms each. So that's about 500 some odd wisdoms, and they are really, really fascinating. One woman said, "Never believe everything you're thinking." And I went, "Oh, how interesting." And I just thought that was just a profound little nugget of what she realized was, just because I thought it doesn't mean it's real. And we talk about turn a page and change your life. So you can pre-order the book on Amazon. The other books are there as well. And the On the Brink book, I did an ebook all by myself and read the book. So it's an audible, and I actually like my voice. So I'm not going to do more of them. It was a lot of work, but it's a fun book, and it's done very well for me. I've been to Mexico and India and Mexico and Canada, and they've done just what they were supposed to, bring me good clients.
I see a question that I want to ask you. This is a little difficult. So it says, if your network is your net worth, what chance does an autistic person have in the tech industry? And they put in parentheses, we have a greater learning curve with regard to communication and connection.
Well, I'm not going to I have a cousin who has an autistic son, and I've been around him enough to begin to understand how difficult that is. But it was, so I actually will push this back to the individual asking the question. This isn't a new situation for you. So now the question is, how have you built a network either online or through methods and models that work for you? For this gentleman, and he's in his early 20s now, we found that when he's on stage, he's extremely competent. And when he had to perform, he did really well. And so the network he began to develop were others like himself who could perform. There's some excellent research that people who do have autistic tendencies tend to be very good in IT and computer sciences, where they're working in very rigorous ways.
True.
So I'm not I'm not going to say you just you need to push through or figure it out. You can't. You are who you are, like we all are. And we all find ways of calculating or cultivating relationships. I work sometimes coaching people who find themselves happy not to build a network at all and have a difficult time building a career that way until they find a space that reflects their personal style. They're shy and they're introverted and they prefer to think and read than they are to talk. And I wish you the very best, but I have a hunch you're already building a good network. That was a good question.
Thank you. That's a great answer too. So, Jared, I'll read the next question if it's okay, and then you can get the next one. When you describe people who are good for sponsors, mentors, do you have any tips for people to avoid? I am from a different toxic field, and with regard to bias towards those with disabilities. Thank you for encouraging documentation.
Well, yeah, this is so timely because I had lunch. I had lunch on Monday with a gentleman who I know who's the director of the Center for Independent Living, who is who's in a wheelchair and has been since for a long time. And so he is disabled. And we were talking about how his career has excelled and how he's now building succession plans so that he can move on to another part. He's been in this job for 30 years. He had his accident when he was in his youth, and it was a motorcycle accident. And I don't have any magic, but I do think that he was telling me he was at a conference, and we're now talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And the accessible part is sending a message that communities and corporations now have to think beyond just DE&I and also include people who have limitations in some fashion. And it's becoming, he said it's becoming quite interesting that we're pushing, it takes time, but we're pushing a new set of standards on all of these levels. I hope that adds some little value to your question.
Thank you. Next, one question to us in terms of the mechanics of things is, are these recorded, and can we access these and others like this? And so, yes, this is recorded, and the previous recordings and this one will be on the site where you signed up for this particular webinar. So you should be able to find it there. Wanda, do you have any corrections for me? Did I say that right?
Yes, you did, and I posted the link.
Oh, you already posted the link, so we're ahead of the game. Okay, thank you. So there's a question here which says, what college level classes help men and women communicate more effectively? So
I'm not sure I can answer that.
I can
Can
take,
you
I
answer
can
that?
take this one. Yeah. So what I have actually found in my own career, and this is in the course, the general ed courses, is anything ethics related. I will say automatically is a huge plus to that. To get yourself just thinking about those interactions, and that's what's in there in ethics and technology. But also there's another class they have that it's not quite the same, but there's a couple of other courses that also kind of focus on this idea of thinking and self-expression. And so I would say that's where it's at. I do think as a program, we could probably do better about having specifically some leadership classes that specifically address this. That's actually, I wouldn't say it's super high on the priority, but maybe we'll say like a yellow priority kind of situation.
We have gen ed classes exactly like you said, Jared. So one of the things that we could possibly do is to go back and take a look and see what we can do to help in this particular regard. So that's a good question, and the as we work on the courses, we will provide that feedback to. As you know, we have the special thing about WGU is that the course is not created by one faculty member. We have a program development team that works over a period of 6 months to a year to develop the courses to the specific requirements that the faculty and others provide. So this is a great, it's a good thing that you brought this up as we are in redeveloping our courses, and we do that constantly to keep up with the technology. We will take that into account, and we will specifically address that issue. Thank you.
Two things to look at.
Yeah.
When I was an undergraduate, I had a 2-credit public speaking course. And I learned a whole lot about something that I had no idea I'd be doing a great deal of. I mean, I do 20 workshops a year, and it was really my naivete was useful because I couldn't get too scared, and I picked a topic called horses, which I loved, and it was one of those ahas, like, oh, I can do this. And then there's a company in the city called Performance of a Lifetime. And if you want to think about, she's a former actress, and she goes into companies and teaches people how to communicate. It isn't just in college, but Performance of a Lifetime uses theater as a metaphor and teaches them role playing, scripting, and rehearsal time and how you improvise. And so there are some interesting models you might consider. She's terrific.
So it was a reasonable question to ask you. You had an answer. You're just testing us.
Well, but it was fun to listen to you. I wasn't going to jump over, but we all have gone through life trying to learn how to do lots of things, and your students who are asking great questions because it's the beginning of a career.
Yeah, so you're saying focus on public speaking, and then the workshops with improv. Did you say that?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, the Performance of a Lifetime, it went into emergency rooms to teach doctors and nurses how to talk to each other. And when you think about that as sort of a model, it's an interesting place. And if they don't talk well to each other, you might not get out of that emergency room. And she's a great lady. And so her name is Kathy Sal. It's a great company.
Awesome. Jared, any other questions? No.
It looks like that's the end of the question list.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea, for taking the time to talk to us. This has been extremely useful. Like we said earlier, that is recorded, and you can go back, listen to what was said, and help it to guide your career. And I hope you all found it useful. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Good night, everybody.